What's going on, everybody? LK here, and today we're going to talk about Asuka in Guilty Gear and how good is he really. So the order of operations here was Asuka dropped a lot of videos, a ton, so many videos about like, oh, it's the most complicated character in fighting games ever, he's so hard, what a weird character, like, right? Then Street Fighter 6 dropped. So a lot of people, of course, went to go cover Street Fighter 6, but that was like a month ago at this point, and Asuka has kind of gone under the radar. There's been a handful of big events for Guilty Gear since he dropped, so there's already been 2 Arc Revo qualifiers, one in Australia, one in Sweden. Neither of them really had any Asuka representation. Then, of course, there was another big one, CEO, which I attended, another tournament with, again, not really any Asuka representation. And people just haven't really come out and said how good they think he is, despite him being out for about a month. So I'm going to do something that I've been doing for a lot of the Season 2 characters. I have a checklist of things I think are important in this game, and we're going to go through them one by one in relation to Lord Asuka. So we're going to be talking about offense, defense, neutral, and knockdown. In my opinion, these are the 4 core phases of any fighting game. So first, we're going to start with offense. The first thing we're going to look at is, does he have moves that are plus? So he's got actually quite a bunch, right? So outside of the normal like close slash and jump ins that everyone else has, he also has various special moves that cause this. And essentially it's just based on what spell cards he has. So whether or not he'll have advantage will depend on just what test case he's in and what he just has in his hand. So for example here, this is what I reset into. So I have 3 things that are really plus here. I have Screamer, which is very plus no matter what. And I also have the Wind Cube, which is also quite plus. But then not only are the special moves themselves plus, but then also he has ways of canceling in and out of stuff to keep advantage as well. So for example, I have this Thunder Cube here, and instead of just doing like 1 draw card, I could do like 2 actions instead. So the normal thing to do with the Water Cube, for example, would be to do something like this. But with something with more blocks done, like the Wind or Thunder Cube, or maybe something where Screamer would look something like this. So he actually has quite a lot of things that are advantageous, it's just situational. Next question would be, does he have an instant overhead of sorts? So again, this is another one that's situational. So it mainly comes from 2 things. So one is he does have a way to set up a 50-50 of a rising overhead. And with the right spell, you can keep your offense going. So since I have both of them, luckily, and from there you'd be able to follow up into a full combo. But he also has this spell. So this spell is overhead, it's quite fast, and it has advantage, but he doesn't have it all the time. So again, this one is another case of he does have these, but they're just situational. Another question would be, does he have a way to make his 5D plus on block, or be able to combo off his 5D with no resource? So this is the standing dust, right? So normally these are extremely unsafe, but the fast dust is actually quite fast. It's 20 frames. It's pretty difficult to react to. So being able to combo off it without using meter, or having like some setup to make it possible for you to combo off it with just your character specific resource, is a pretty big advantage in this game. So like many things with this character, the answer is yes, but it's kind of situational. So this is a very simple example, but off throw, if you have the cube, you can do this and link honestly a bunch of moves. So you might be like, oh, Soul's crouching the whole time, but he's actually switching his guard because I'm using the CPU, right? So if I do it like this, so this is just another case of if he has the right situation, he can do it. Does he have a 50-50? Again, this one is kind of situational. From his release, he had a throw left-right, if I recall correctly. So he had something like this, but similar to our previous examples, spells also help with this too. Or another tricky way you can kind of think of stuff is when he has the overhead spell, if your opponent is paying attention to what spells you have in your hand at the moment, it can open up situations like using this. Now all of a sudden you have a pretty tricky situation of delay low, or immediate overhead. So the next question would be, how fast is the character at building meter? So in my opinion, Asuka's pretty good at building meter, mostly because he's doing so many actions, and all these actions are considered special moves, and when you do special moves, you gain a little bit of meter. It's also not very easy to avoid his projectiles, so it's pretty likely you will get hit or at least block his projectiles in neutral, which also helps with meter building. So this was just an example of me just honestly doing spells in test case 1. I built a bunch of meter from a couple things. One, Soul blocked everything, but also each action counts as a special move. So when I have Wind Cube, Thunder Cube, Water Cube, and Wind Cube. So I'm going to do Wind Cube and cancel it into Draw, and then cancel it into another special move. And each one of these actions will give me a little bit of meter, on top of Soul blocking the cubes, and that also giving me meter. So something like this. So his potential for building meter is really, really good, and I think it's one of his secret standout things as a character. Next, we got to talk about his throw. So what type of things does he get off his throw? I kind of talked about this for the, like, what type of 50-50s does the character get, and like I mentioned before, he does have a throw 50-50 that he can do. And the other one where you can set up the 50-50 high-low depending on what spells you have. So since I have 2 water cubes here, I'm able to do it. On this one, you might be like, well, it's situational in the fact that you need either a water cube or an explosion cube. It's called Screamer, to do the 50-50 high-low. But between the water cube and the explosion, those are 11 of the spells in test case 1. So you have a pretty high chance of having it in your hand when you even get the situation at the start of the round. So if I reset, for example, see, I'm chilling. So the next question would be, how safe is the character against YRC? So YRC, a uniquely strong defensive mechanic. So many fighting games have guard cancels, but some characters have weak ones, some characters have really broken ones. But in Guilty Gear Strive, it's a universal one called YRC. Different characters have different ways of dealing with it. So he has some pretty normal stuff, like jabs. Uniquely, his kicks actually are not YRC safe, but he has a couple of other unique things to fight YRC. So one example involves his 2D. So his 2D actually is a projectile. So even though it has a pretty standard attack level, he's not affected by the hit stop of the move. So where a normal move will cause like this little shock, the 2D doesn't really have that. So he has one really cheeky way of baiting YRCs with 2D. Which I think is very, very strong. But then you also have, again, specific spells. So for example, Screamer, the explosion spell, is also a guard crush. So just doing it makes it so that you can't be YRC'd. But then there's also this acceleration staff. So this, if you don't play him, you might not know this, but when he sets this staff, all his projectile cubes become guard crushes. So now these cannot be YRC'd at all. Where normally this would be pretty trivial to do. In the case of Arpeggio, so this is the 5 rolling one, since they come late, it's just YRC safe basically by default. And then there's the Giant Cube, the delayed TARDIS Metron, where if you actually don't cancel it, it becomes YRC safe, where if you do cancel it, then you will get YRC'd. So he has a lot of situational YRC safe things as well. Next question would be, how safe is the character against burst? So when we're talking about this, we're usually talking about combos. His combos aren't like hyper burst safe, at least from what I've seen so far. Does the character need to hit you to win or not? So this sounds silly, but some characters don't actually need to hit you to win the game. And to clear this up, what I mean is, from an offense perspective, some characters need to actually hit you and do a combo to set up their good situation, or they need to throw you to set up their good situation, where some characters can get their good situations from neutral. So Habikia's pretty, I use this example a lot, but I just think it's very straightforward, of like he curses you and then does this, and then he just has like so much control, right? He can choose to shoot depending on resource. He can, so sometimes you see him do something like this. and then they start their offense from here. So he has the ability to set up a situation in neutral, and that can lead to his win con from neutral. So what about Asuka? So in my opinion, there are times where he can beat you without hitting you, because if he's here and he has like a good hand, then he can use spells to zone you, especially if you don't know how to deal with the projectile cubes, and then switch to whatever test case he wants to go for the situation that he wants when he wants, and he's building this meter the entire time. Then we have to talk about his average damage. So his combos vary by quite a bit. So his standard BNBs, I don't feel like they do a lot of damage. It's usually things like this. Some people do like an ID reset off this, but it's usually him looping like close slash and 2H. But then he has situational stuff too, like the way he combos off his jabs. Just for a simple example. So outside of like really memey situational stuff, which I'm sure you've seen Twitter clips of crazy setups with staffs and stuff, I think his damage is not crazy high. Finally, the last thing we'd have to talk about is what is his wall break situation like, and in my opinion, it's quite good. So after this super, he has time to basically set up the way he wants. He's good and positive because he builds meter really fast, as we talked about before. And he has one of the best wall break supers in the game. And what I mean is specifically, in a neutral wall break situation, this is incredibly strong. I think it's the best example of a move like this in the game. There are other characters who have this, like Zato and Bridget and arguably Baiken, but his is by far the fastest and it helps him out a ton. And he has positive anyway, so he's going to get that resource back really quickly. So next we got to talk about defense. So the first thing on this part of the list is how fast is their fastest button. They have a 5 frame 2P. The main thing about this 2P that's not that great is that you can knock them away with 2P 6P, but there are some characters who get full combos, or at least like scary combos of their jabs, where his is situational unless you go straight into 6P. If you have like a water cube like I showed before, you are able to do a short combo and then set up. So do they have a reversal? So he has technically 1, some people say 2. So first off, it is that Diamond Crystal Rock spell. This is actually a DP. He only has 1 in his whole deck. It's in test case 1. So it's not very common you'll see this. But then also, because of the speed of this, some people do use this on defense. It's not invulnerable at all, but again, it's just really fast. It's 7 frames and it goes full screen. So I've seen people use that in defensive situations, but technically his only true invincible reversal is this. For a spell, by the way, compared to other spells that have like all these cancel options, you're basically just, I mean, and it makes sense too. Like there's no real reason for him to have a DP that is special cancelable, even if he only has 1 in the deck. That is really annoying. So thank you, Arxis, for not, you know, honestly not fucking with us and just making his DP like mad normal. The next question would be, is there super horizontal or vertical? So again, this is not really a reversal, even though people use it situationally like that, but this is a full screen horizontal super, so it goes in that category. So then next we have to talk about his backdash. So here's his backdash. He has a 5 frame backdash, total 21 duration. So it's another character to join Baiken. So Baiken also has a slightly slower, right? So the standard would be 5 frames invincible, 20 frames total. Asuka and Baiken have 5 frames invincible, 21 frames total. And despite this slide thing, this little moonwalk animation he's doing, he is considered airborne from frame 1 to 18 as well. Now the thing is, in Baiken's case, I didn't really know why they made her backdash 21, besides maybe they decided to animate stuff I'm not paying attention to, or they want like numbers to line up a certain way. You know, she has parry that's currently 7 frame active, but in his case he has no such reversals, so I think they just made it 21 for fun. So next question is, how fast is the character's 6P? So this matters because since we're talking about defense, there's some strings that some characters can 6p out of, where other characters can't, depending on how much invincibility they have and how fast their 6p is. So I have Mr. White Fang here to show us. So in my opinion, his 6p is not the best for defense, Asuka. So it's 11 frame startup, 1 to 4 upper body, 5 to 16 above knees. So what this means is in situations like this, I will get counter hit 100% of the time. There's nothing I can really do about this. Where Baiken, in comparison, her 6p is 9 frame startup and it's 1 to 3 upper body. So the difference is she's able to escape in ways like this. The last question for defense is one you might remember is, does the character build meter quickly? And you might remember the answer to that question is yes. So the reason why this matters on defense is because the more meter you build, the more access you have to your defensive options, especially things like YRC, or maybe more return for mashing out on block. So the difference between getting something like this and being able to cash out, or simply trying to turn the tide of the situation with YRC. Again, a lot of the reason just comes from him, the way he plays neutral, and how much actions he's taking. So again, so just from doing a few spells into cancels, I built around like 15 to 20% meter with not much resistance. So next we must discuss neutral. So question number 1 would be, can the character attack from safe ranges? So I think this one is an easy yes. He has so many spells that control space between things that are pretty straight obvious, like going a straight line, like Thunder Cube or Water Cube, or the all-encompassing, super huge area control Wind Cube, things that mess with your anti-air attempts or jump-ins like the Screamer. He just has a lot of ways of attacking from a lot of weird angles that characters can't usually fight from, and he's usually spaced in these situations too, so it's not easy for people to just kind of pull up on them unless they're fast or they have some type of counterplay prepared. The next question would be, how fast is the character's air dash? These are pretty standard for air dashes. His movement in this manner is not that unique. Having a fast air dash means you can attack faster out of your air dash, which means you're a little bit explosive in neutral. There's only 2 characters that really have a faster air dash, which would be Milia and Chip, but I think Geo is also notable because her air dash just has a kind of weird angle, like a weird short angle, and she's also a fast character. And the next question would be, do they have a slow jump H? The answer to this is no, but he does have a slow jump D. So why does having a slow jump in matter? So usually characters with slow jump ins, like something that's more than 11 frames, it's usually given to a character for one of 2 reasons. Either to be a mix-up tool, or to be something to catch people sleeping as a jump-in. So some fighting games, and if you played like Dragon Ball FighterZ or BlazBlue, or even Street Fighter 6, they have moves that have this. They have moves that have anti-air properties on them. So it doesn't matter how late you actually do the anti-air move, as long as you do it, you will anti-air the jump-in. But Guilty Gear doesn't quite work that way. Even for moves like 6p that have upper body invul, and they're quite literally invincible, they really do mean that, and it's by hitbox hurtbox interaction. So if you could have something that reaches far low enough that you could hit somebody who's trying to 6p you, that's a pretty big advantage. So since he could attack from safe ranges here by using like spells and things like that, combined with a deep jump in, it can be kind of hard for people to pick what to do. Soul will trivially 6p my IADJH, even my IADJK. But if I do IADJD with the right timing, then I will pretty easily hit his 6p. He has to be faster. Usually they put this type of move on jump H. You'd be thinking about Ramthal jump H, or Baiken jump H, or Testament jump H, or Kyle jump H, but in Asuka's case, it's on his jump dust. Can the character stall in the air? And I would say yes. Not only with just drawing cards, but also just doing spells in the air. These are all valid ways of stalling. At this point, a lot of characters have ways of altering their air momentum in the air. The reason why this is good should be pretty straightforward. It just makes it hard for people to 6p you. It makes it hard for people to know which way you're going to move, which makes you more unpredictable. The next question would be, can the character 50-50 you from neutral? This is extremely situational, but he does have these. I would say this would mostly come from test case 3, from a combination of spells like Arpeggio, and moves plus teleport. It's not that common he straight up 50-50s you from neutral. He usually has to have a specific combination of things to get something from neutral, but he can convert his neutral into block string offense, which gives him plenty of time to figure out what he wants to do. The next question would be, can the character get in on you immediately after a gold burst? So my answer to this is technically not really, but the more important thing is that he has the ability to set up. So he's able to act on you from full screen after a gold burst, which is quite strong and not that common in the game. Next question would be, does the character have a fuck it RC option? So if you don't know what this is a term from Exerd. I specifically used to call it fuck it YRC because in that game, YRC is applied to projectiles. It's a 25-meter option. In this game, YRC is a defensive option. But if you don't know what I mean by fuck it RC, is some type of move that normally is really punishable, but with meter it makes it safe, so you just kind of throw it out just to see what happens. So Soul has a bunch of these, right? He has this, he has this. So he has a bunch of just like YOLO fucking RC options that he could do. I mean, to be honest, true lords will do this to you. Now, what I would say is that while he doesn't have fucking RC by my definition, it's not like he doesn't have a YOLO option. I mean, honestly, it's not a YOLO option, and it's just straight up this. This gives you plenty of time to assess the situation, draw more cards, heal mana, and again, it's very fast, and it hits from really far, it hits from full screen. So it's something you could definitely mix in just to assess the situation. Next question would be, how fast is their 6P? We talked about this before for defense. Mostly having a fast 6P just makes it easier to anti-air things. You can anti-air later. But despite his 6P being a little slow, I do think it's one of the good 6Ps of the game in neutral. So I think it's fine that it's on a little bit of the slower side. Next question would be, does the character have moves or attacks or situations that makes the opponent not really be able to use their standard options in a situation? I think Asuka has this in spades. As far as his actual buttons, probably the main one that causes this is his sweep because of how huge and fast it is, and it's a projectile, so the frame advantage is different when you cancel into stuff, but also just his core spells all make you play the game differently. The water cube is the fastest by far, so you can't really react to it, so look how fast it is, right? Or if you don't have a way of dealing with this, for example, then you can't really move very freely. And then he has little tweaks depending on which test case he has to affect the spell. So I have the acceleration spell, which we mentioned before. So this one makes everything guard crush, and it makes everything faster. So the already unreactable water cube becomes faster, but then the wind spell also becomes super juiced here, as does the thunder spell, as does the water spell. So it can be hard for people to play their typical game against him unless they play a fast character. And the last question is, can the character convert their hits into full combos, ideally into wall break if they feel like it, without using 50 meter? Once again, the answer is situational. It's mostly revolving around what spell he has. So his standard combos have pretty good corner carry, but with the right combination of spells, you can push your combo until you reach wall break. So something like this, my luck was pretty good here, and I just got Thunder Cube into Thunder Cube into Thunder Cube over and over. But there are ways for you to use the spells he has to just push your combos into a wall break if you feel like it. But again, that's situational. You have to pay attention to what cards you're drawing while you combo them. Last but not least, we need to talk about Knockdown. So question number 1 is, can the character win off a throw? He gets to get started off throw, so I would say yes. So besides the aforementioned mix-ups we talked about, he also can just set up off his throws and start meeting you with spells to get the spells that he wants. So I would say yes, he could definitely win the game off throwing you. The next question would be, how much resource does a character build off throw? So for the typical throw mix-up, he doesn't really build a lot. Even with situational 50-50 spells like the cube, he doesn't necessarily build too much meter. Now you might have been like, okay, he built like 35 meter, like that's fine, and I'd be like, sure, but my standards are pretty high, frankly, and it's important to build a lot of meter off these type of mix-ups. So one thing that I think is really stand out about my current main, Baiken, is that she builds insane meter, honestly, for Thorgu, she builds an insane amount of meters. So, for example, $50. I got 50 for that immediately. 50, and for about half the cast, this type of sequence would bleed into a game-winning situation. Being able to get close to 50 is also fine because you can just string into it, but he doesn't really build meter like that from his mix-ups. But if he mixes you up, he himself is just good at building meter just through his normal gameplay, so I think it kind of evens out. But if we're talking about purely based off him 50-50 you, especially up throw, I can't really give this point to him. The next question would be, can the character protect himself from reversals and mix at the same time? I think he does this in a pretty straightforward way because he's either using projectiles to mix or he's just safe jumping you and he gets a 50-50 off his safe jump. So I think he's pretty decent at this. And then the last question is the good knockdown loopable? So this one is kind of weird for him. Like, if you're talking about his left-right throw mix in mid-screen, if people are still doing it, I'm not totally sure. That goes into 2D, you're not really trying to loop that. And then off throw, I imagine they basically try to break the wall or get the resources he wants. So in my head, he doesn't really have a good knockdown to aim for to loop. So if you're wondering what I mean, if you look at a situation we did before with Baiken, so she gets this, and her H comedy knockdown is pretty good. You can left-right with it. If you have resources, you could high-low and left-right, depending on how you set things up. And if you feel like it, you don't have to go for a wall break right away. You can push the knockdown further and do it again and again. Where, at least to my knowledge, currently with the character, he doesn't really do that. But alright, that's Asuka for now. So in summary, on offense, he has moves that are plus, and then he has just a ton of situational moves that are plus because spells. But since he has so many, even though they're situational in that there's different amount of advantages depending what you do, he does have a ton of moves that have advantage. He does have a fast instant overhead of sorts. This is also situational. He has a safe 5D. That's also situational. He has a 50-50, so he has a couple of guaranteed ones, and then the rest are all situational, again, depending on spells. He builds meter very quickly. His throw situation kind of varies, but they're good overall. He's not just pretty good against YRC, but he also has some unique ways of fighting the mechanic. I wouldn't say he was uniquely strong against burst, in my opinion. And another good thing about him is that he doesn't need to hit you necessarily to win. He can win from neutral and convert that to offense, which is quite good. His average damage varies a lot, but I would say his average damage is a little bit on the lower side, and his wallet break situation is quite good. For defense, his fastest button is 2P at 5 frames, which is in the slowest group. There's characters like Baiken who have 4 frame, 2P to mash on. There's Soul and Chip who have 3 frame, 2Ps to mash on. I mean, if you go back to Baiken, you know, she's got parry, which is frame 1. You know, there's a lot of unique things that are very fast. So this just means that he's in the slower group just because he has just the bare minimum of 5 frame 2P. He technically has a meterless reversal in the DP spell, but it is extremely rare that you will actually see it, but it is there. His super is horizontal, but it's not invincible, but it is horizontal, so we put it in that group. His backdash is pretty normal. Technically, it's slightly worse than a normal one because it's 21 frames instead of 20, but I think that's negligible, so don't worry about that too much. His 6P is on the slower side for defense, which is not good because that means he can't get out of strings that other characters would be able to. His jump is normal, and he builds meter very quickly, which means he could use it to get people off of him or make his mashes have more return with RC. For neutral, the character is very good at attacking from safe ranges and also unusual ranges. His air dash is pretty standard, but he does have a slow jump D, so he could mess with 6Ps using that. He can also stall in the air. He's really, really good at that. He can 50-50 you from neutral situationally. It's not something that happens very often, but he does have the ability to do it. He can set up immediately after Gold Burst, which is a great advantage to him. He doesn't really have a fuck it RC option, but he can just send his super to Submicron. His 6P is slow, but I think for neutral it's okay just because he has so many unique options in neutral that it's pretty fair and fine for him to have a slower 6P. He has basically his whole moveset makes you not play your normal neutral game, so that's a great advantage for him. And situationally, he can convert pretty well in neutral, but again, it's RNG, but he will usually have the cards, especially since you're starting in test case 1, and that has the most ways of converting in combos. Then finally, for knockdown, can he win off throw? Kinda. Not in as direct way as someone like Lycan, or like Gold Lewis, or Zato, or something like that, but still quite good. He's technically not great at building resource off throw mix-ups, but he himself is good at building resource, so in my head this kind of evens out. It's pretty trivial for him to bait reversals and mix you at the same time. And I wouldn't necessarily say he has a good knockdown that's loopable. So overall, you might have heard me be like situationally. That's probably just the main thing about this character, is that a lot of things just depend on the situation. But overall, I think because this character is neutral and resource, I actually find him to be quite good. There are a couple of top players in NA who think he's just straight up top tier. I personally think he is like a high tier character, like he's a very good character. I haven't been playing him as much as I wanted to. I've been putting a lot of serious time into my bike, and hopefully that's been showing. In my opinion, I think he's the strongest Season 2 character from their release, because again, remember, Bridget had to be buffed. Most people had a really low opinion of Bridget when she was released, where now a lot of people think she's top tier, but that was after a patch in December, so Asuka did not have that luxury, but I still think he's quite strong. As usual though, let me know if you guys have any questions or comments. Hopefully everything made sense. I'm actually going to post one more tier list for this season. I know I've mentioned it a couple times in videos, but I think they're going to do it, the Season 3 announcement at EVO. You know, there's a whole extra year of tournaments for the Guilty Gear Strive World Tour, the Arc Rebel World Tour. And it's been a month since Asuka released, and I have plenty of time on him, so I'm going to be including Asuka in that list, so look forward to that. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. As usual, shout outs to the patrons as well on Patreon. If you're interested in that, I do like early video releases there. Sometimes I let people know how I work on content, process, things like that. I try to do viewer request videos. There's a bunch of stuff over there, so go check that out if you're interested in that. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.